This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Sorry about that. I literally had to fly in from outer space.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
The story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, that's all you need to know about me. What I do with this podcast, though, well, I'm here to talk, as the story suggests, as the title suggests even, of the stories of films. And I look at development stories, behind the scenes stories, marketing stories, release story, all those bits and bobs that go to make the films that we know and love, just that, the films that we know and love, or sometimes love. But just basically a celebration of the fact of how hard it is to make a film and saluting the people who get one over the line and get it to a point where we're still talking about it, oftentimes many, many years later. What you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast. I'm really chuffed to be able to talk to Barnaby Thompson in this one. Now, you may or may not be familiar with Barnaby Thompson. First of all, he's the director of a brand new movie that's coming out in UK cinemas the week this podcast is being released. That movie is Pixie. It's written by Preston Thompson, his son, as we're going to talk about. It stars Olivia Cooke, Ben Hardy, Daryl McCormack with Alec Baldwin and Cole Meany in the mix there as well. Now, what's particularly notable with Pixie, apart from the fact that it's a film worth checking out, is that this is a film, a British film that's coming out through Paramount. Now, a good decade or two ago, Paramount had a UK arm that was dedicated to finding British films to fund back and release. Then off the back of the success of Blue Story, which came out last year, it's been more active again, for the first time again in a long time, in hunting down British projects that usually Paramount in the UK, what it had been doing, had been releasing the huge Paramount projects that come from the US. So this has been a reversal of strategy, really, and Pixie is very much a film that's a beneficiary of that. Now, Barnaby Thompson, just to give you some background, I mean, as a director, he's not done that many films. He co-directed St. Trinian's and St. Trinian's 2, The Legends of Frit and Skull. So this is the first film that he's directed solo, if you like. But it's his career as a producer, really, that has long made him someone I really wanted to have a chat with. So in the early 90s, he was producing or associate producing the assorted Saturday Night Live movies, starting with Wayne's World, of course. He then came to the UK, back to the UK, and he was instrumental in films like Spice World and Kevin and Perry Go Large. He headed up Ealing Studios right throughout the 2000s. I mean, he was producing films like Dorian Gray, The Importance of Being Earnest, Lucky Break, which I've covered in a previous podcast special where I talked to its director Peter Catania. Also Alien Autopsy with Anton Deck, remember that one. He's been one of the most prolific and instrumental British film producers of the last decade or two. And so what you'll find with the chat that I'm about to have with him, we're going to talk about Pixie. We're also going to talk about films like Spice World, which he nearly directed as well. We're going to talk about Wayne's World, and we're going to talk basically about his career making films in Britain. I'm going to kick things off by playing you a snippet of the trailer of Pixie, and my conversation with Barnaby Thompson will kick off the other side of this clip.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Pablo Escobar. Welcome to Sligo.
I figure you got a corpse in the back of your car and you're looking to skip town quick, am I right?
I should probably let you know up front that I'm partial to adventure.
You're saying it's priests that are after us.
These guns aren't going to shoot themselves.
Amen.
Deadly gangster priest, yeah?
The Lord will have his vengeance.
You best not see your little fellas when we get out. It's a dangerous path you're taking here, boys. 1 minute, you're laughing, smiling, all easy breezy, like then bang! Stop what you're doing!
Take your gun out of Father Nabby's mouth.
This is a church.
I didn't know they had Catholics in Afghanistan.
That was a clip from the new film Pixie. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by its producer and director, and from what I can glean, so many other things, Barnaby Thompson. So hello and congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to start by just saying, don't take this the wrong way, but last year when I read in the trade press that Paramount Pictures was backing a British film that was shooting in Ireland, I sort of had to read it twice, given that it seems so long that a major studio has been so overt, really, in backing British productions that have been made in the UK and Ireland. I wonder, I mean, is that unusual to you as well, obviously with your experience with Paramount in the past, but also how on earth did all this come to pass?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that the studios from time to time realize that there is a big international market, and also I think that increasingly local films do well in local markets. And so I think that as they reduce the amount of films they make in America, they realize that they have to fill up their pipelines by investing in local films. Yeah. And I think that we were fortunate in the sense that we came along just at the point when Paramount was turning their mind to that. Although they did do Blue Story as well, which is, very well.
So, because if I've got this right as well, when Pixie started coming together, it wasn't a studio movie. That it was a Paramount acquisition, if I've got that right, and that you were putting this film together via a network of smaller companies. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's an independent movie. Yeah. And so, which is always a joy to put together. Yeah. And so one of the key anchors of any independent is your local distributor. And so in our case, our local distributor happens to be Paramount. But there'll be other distributors in other territories. So it's put together as an independent film, just happens to involve a studio.
So, I mean, if I can ask the boring and predictable question then of how it came to you, because I know it's written by Preston Thompson, and I wonder if there's a link there, although I don't assume it, and what it was that you saw in this that made you think this is what I want to do.
So Preston is my son.
Yep.
And he and I, I started off making documentaries. So yes, I shot several documentaries in the west of Ireland. So the west of Ireland is a place that's very close to my heart. About three years ago, Preston and I found ourselves with some time to kill. So we decided to go on a little road trip. And I was keen to show him that part of Ireland because I think it's one of the nicest places in the world. And so we spent a week driving down the west coast of Ireland. Yeah. Having a nice time, not discussing movies at all, particularly. And the germ of the idea of Pixie obviously came to him whilst we were driving, and he went away and wrote the script, which he gave me to read, really, as in my role as father, probably more than anything else, and it just combined the elements of the thing that I was looking to do next. And so I've obviously produced a lot of films. Yeah. I co-directed the two St. Trinian's movies. Yeah. And I was very keen to find one for myself to do that sort of leaned into my comedic roots, but also gave me a chance to do something more of a genre piece. Yeah. And I think that what Preston had combined in the script was quite, hopefully, a real story of these kids trying to make sense of their lives, and Pixie trying to escape to start a new life, but also the sort of the comedic elements. And I think there's something about Ireland that made it more cinematic. Yeah. So, the opportunity to play out a comedy, which was a road movie, which was also a thriller, against that fantastic landscape, was just immediately appealing.
Because if I've got this right as well, and please correct me if I'm saying and making any assumptions here that are incorrect, Ireland was the birthplace of your father as well. Is that right? And
Yeah, that's right. My dad came from, he was born and grew up in Belfast. I grew up in London. But
Yeah.
So there's always been an Irish vibe in the home. And I rediscovered Ireland in my early 20s. And I was just, fell in love with the place.
So for you as a human being, and your extensive list of credits, which I do want to come to a little bit shortly, it has taken you all over the world. I just wonder, is this particularly special then, that you've got a film that's written by your son that takes you back a little bit to your own roots as well? Did you really feel the connection there?
Yeah, it's magical.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it's magical to work with your child. That's not anything that you expect or plan for. And secondly, just to be back there, where in that wildness, and to be getting to do the thing that I've always wanted to do. It's just, it's difficult to find the words to describe what a thrill that is.
That sounds wonderful. I really think as a human that just sounds particularly special to be able to do that. And what I really took from the film, I enjoyed the film, and what I really took from it was just how determined it is to be outdoors as well. That you talk about, you talked about a little bit about the geography of Ireland there, Northern Ireland, and your camera is very much absorbing a lot of those landscapes. And I just wonder if that was a determination from the start, that if you were going to do this film, you wanted to explore the landscape, you wanted not to be in a studio as much as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that one of my favourite films, possibly my favourite film, is Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
And I always saw this really as a contemporary Western. And, the parallels, obviously, with Butch and Sundance and Catherine Ross making their way across the wilds of America, and Pixie, Harlan and Frank making their way across the wilds of Ireland. So that idea of making an Irish Western was very much, and the idea of these very modern kids finding themselves in that wildness with these, up against these eccentric, larger-than-life gangsters, seemed to be... I remember pitching the movie to David Holmes, the composer.
Yes.
And he was like, "Oh, what do you mean, like an Irish spaghetti Western?" And, in a way, that's what we set out to make, is a sort of a comedic version of an Irish spaghetti Western.
And you just talked briefly just a few minutes ago about you were looking for something particularly to direct yourself, because obviously you have directed the St. Trinian's films with Oliver Parker, wasn't it, off the top of my head? And also you've got a background in directing documentaries as well, going back into the 80s. But this determination to direct a feature by yourself, has that kind of been bubbling for a little while? Have you just been on the lookout for that piece of material?
I've been looking since for about 25 years. Like all of us, we think our life is a plan, and it never quite works out like that.
Yeah.
For me, what happened was I started off directing and producing documentaries.
Yeah.
I was more or less out of the blue. I was given this opportunity to go and work for a man called Lorne Michaels.
Yes, I was going to ask you about him. Yeah.
Saturday Night Live. So I found myself working at Paramount, making films with the guys from Saturday Night Live. The first film we made was Wayne's World.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Which was obviously a huge hit. And so that took me off on an odyssey. So I spent 6 years making comedies in America, and then I came back and set up a company in London, and the first film we made, which I almost directed, but because it was the first film we were making, it just didn't seem the right time, was the Spice Girls movie.
Yeah, and was that Fragile Films? Was that?
That was Fragile Films, exactly. And so ever since then, there were moments where I thought, maybe I should direct some, but there was just too much going on. And then in 2000 or 2001, I was a part of a group of people that bought Ealing Studios.
Yes. And
so then I ended up running Ealing Studios, so that every time I kind of got close to directing, something else would come up that would lead me away. And then when St. Trinian's happened, Ollie Park and I mean, we've known each other literally since about the age of 2, and I'd produced a lot of his films, and we're old friends.
Yeah.
And it just seemed appropriate for us to do those together, which was a great fun experience.
But it struck me even when you were making the St. Trinian's films before, because I just tried to juggle the timeline of your career a little bit. But even when you were directing those films, you seemed to be producing other films pretty much concurrently with that. That there was never just one project on the go, and I wonder if that was a bit of a difference with Pixie as well. That this was more yours in a strange way. That you weren't being pulled left, right, and centre by running a company or producing other people's movies.
No, I think it's the only time in my life that I've actually just worked on one thing.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. It was an absolute joy just to because I was literally, we would finish St. Trinian's, and literally like 15 days later, I would be on set again producing something else.
Yeah.
So actually to have the headspace just to be focused entirely on one movie and just to have the joy of just spending your time just living in that world was a great pleasure. And it was just such a treat just to be able to sort of relish every small detail of a film rather than trying to do 56 things in a day.
Well, you just mentioned small details there, and there were little things I was picking up while watching Pixie. I'm going incredibly spoiler light on this, but it just struck me someone had gone to the effort of just setting up little things that could have been done a lot easier. So, for instance, at one point you just film on an airport runway, for instance, and it doesn't seem there's any faking of that. Then a lot of nuns come in at one point, and it's just like all these little bits and bobs that you just put into the mix of that. I wonder if that's half the fun of a film like this, that you do experiment, you do make it a cocktail of just little comedic touches like that.
Definitely. And I think that what happens is that the more you become absorbed in a project and the more it starts coming together, and the more you have your team, so you go, you obviously spend a lot of time driving around with your locations guy looking for locations, and so you'll come across places and go, oh, wait a minute, if we were here, you could do this, Preston and I spent a lot of time just working on the script, and so you would ideas would develop, and then ideas would develop out of the ideas that just developed, so that's one of the great joys, I think, of putting a film together is, and also with the actors, so there's just, as each element comes in, you get to delve a bit deeper, and someone will come up with an idea, or there'll be a happy circumstance, or you'll come across a location which will make you go, sometimes, and quite a lot, there were locations where we found them, and it was as if Preston had seen them before he'd written the script. But, they just, you find places just, oh, this is it, But it's other times you go, oh. So, for example, we have that scene at the end, which takes place in a broken down church. Now, originally that was written as a church. Yeah. But there's a practical issue of finding churches that you can have that kind of...
Especially, I know where you're going there.
...scene in without wanting to spoil the film. And so we came across this old church that was closed, and it sort of suddenly, because it had that great quality of being kind of deserted, broken down church, we went with that.
Yeah.
Which I think adds to the atmosphere.
You've pulled together a young ensemble before when you were casting the St. Trinian's film. It strikes me that at the heart of Pixie is just this trio. At the heart of it, Daryl McCormack, Ben Hardy and Olivia Cook. And I live in the alternate universe where Me and Earl and the Dying Girl got far more acclaim, made far more money and won far more awards than it did. But I'm just curious, can you talk about finding those three, and then once you'd got them together, appreciating there's an independent film background to this, what kind of time you had to get them to know each other and to get them working with each other?
So Pixie was always, because it's her movie,
yes,
and she's she's not exactly a femme fatale, but she's quite ruthless, and so we needed to find an actress who had a natural empathy, so that she could sail as close to the wind as possible without people turning on her. And she also had to have, I think, a natural strength. And I mean, Me and Earl was a great film.
Yes.
I thought, and I agree with you. It was funny the way it got. It got huge acclaim, I think, at Sundance, but then it didn't quite take off.
Yeah.
And Thoroughbreds was also a great movie.
Yes.
I don't know where you...
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, I didn't realize Olivia was English. I thought she was American because of all the stuff I'd seen her in. And when she did Vanity Fair, I thought that she really gave Betty Sharp a lot of the qualities that I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so quite early on, we approached her. And actually, to be honest, the first time we sent her the script, she turned it down. And we did more work on the script, and took it back to her, and then she said yes. And I think that the moment I met her, I was, she comes from Manchester. I had no idea.
Yeah, she's Oldham, isn't she? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she comes from Oldham, and it's and so she's incredible. She has that ability just to completely lose herself in parts. But I think that this taps into a lot of her own personality. She's very in your face, upfront, cheeky, funny, dynamic, all those things. And so I think that she really relished getting a chance to play that kind of wicked character. And so once we had her, we couldn't really do any of the other casting until we had her. So once we had her, then it was about finding the boys.
Yeah.
Darryl was the young Irish actor who I was put onto by someone in Dublin quite early on, and I met him, and I was immediately taken by his charm and his innocence. And I think that for Harland, getting that, you want someone who has that in a way that is believable, but doesn't cross the line into, they're dim. So I think that Darryl has that innocence to him, and he comes from Limerick, and he felt like the real thing. And then Frank, I auditioned a lot of actors, and there were a lot of people. The people will have something that you really like, and then there's something that holds you back. And then I wasn't really familiar with Ben at all.
Yeah.
I'd seen Bohemian Rhapsody, but I hadn't really clocked him in it because he's sort of in heavy disguise.
Yeah.
But he came into the audition, and he had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
And a great sense of charm, and just then when casting works well, you know someone straight away.
Yeah.
And then I put the three of them together in a room, and it happened just like that. And I don't know whether it's the Preston would tell you it's the quality of the writing. The actors would tell you it's the quality of the acting.
Yeah.
I just think that the three of them, and it's always a moment that we don't quite know which way it's going to go, but the three of them really from word go just hit it off.
Yeah.
And so we had some rehearsal, but not that much rehearsal. I don't like to over rehearse it, so I think it's good to keep it as spontaneous as possible on set. But what we did do was we did a lot of their scenes first. So sort of the first 3 weeks of shooting was basically the three of them. So they had they spent a lot of time singing, sort of 80s pop songs between takes in that car, so that they were pretty well bonded by the time sort of the other actors showed up.
Again, looking into your history and just the timescales of projects that you've put together, because one thing I remember when this was announced was that the film was going to shoot for 7 weeks in Northern Ireland and in Ireland. And I mean, I remember films like Spice World and Kevin and Perry Go Large, which obviously you produced, that seemed to come together at absolutely frantic breakneck speed just to take advantage of a moment of time when the characters and the personalities involved in those films were at their most popular. Now, I'm just wondering if you can kind of contrast that a little bit, because it strikes me as a producer, you've been used to all throughout your career up against immovable hard deadlines and just moments where things have to get done. I just wonder about contrasting that with being able to spend nearly 2 months filming this, and I'm not suggesting it was easy by any measure, but filming this in and around Ireland.
Well, I think that obviously my background in terms of movies was, my training in terms of movies was taking characters from Saturday Night Live and putting them in to movies. So in a way, Spice World and Kevin and Perry was very familiar territory to me, in terms of that. I think, and what you have is you have characters that they already know who they are. And so you can be very responsive, because you kind of, what your centre is. I think the difference in that and something like Pixie is you're really creating a world and a tone and a group of characters, and you really don't have a full sense of what that is until you've got the actors, until you've got the locations, until you really start shooting it. So I think that it requires a different, the creative nurturing goes on a lot when you're actually on set and it's coming alive, in the last weeks of pre-production. So it as a rhythm, it has a different kind of intensity.
Yeah, I mean, I did just want to ask one thing on Saturday Night Live, actually, because, I mean, first of all, you thank Lorne Michaels in the credits of this movie, I noticed, and I wonder if he was any involvement in it at all. And secondly, when you get to the end of making the brilliant Wayne's World 2, and it doesn't go off and set the box office alight in the way that the first one did, do you just sit there and just think, well, just thanks a bunch? We put out this really good, entertaining film, this really that improves on the sequel, and then the audience has disappeared.
Well, so to answer the first question, Lorne is he's now a great friend, and he is also the wisest man in show business. So he's very much my mentor. So nearly whenever I face a problem, I always think to myself, what would Lorne do? Yeah. So that's why I thank him for the movie. In terms of Wayne's World 2, I think that the one thing that you can never legislate for, in a way, with pop culture is zeitgeist. Yeah. And I think that the first Wayne's World landed at a particular moment in time where we absolutely just became zeitgeist. Yeah. And I think that every now and then that happens. If you're lucky, every now and then that happens in your career. And it's obviously got, it's Mike Myers' brilliance, the brilliance of the writers and stuff, but it's also just about, it was that moment when the Seattle scene was taking off. So it's just lots of things came together to make, and so I think that the second film, which I think in many ways is a more polished movie. Yeah, it's great. Just came just a little bit too late. And I think that, and also people never had the same, it's very hard for people sometimes, because the first film was such a moment in people's lives. Yeah. Somehow the second film, I think, was destined to be, it was can never be the same, because it's always good, you're revisiting. And I think that, it did fine, but it was, it's funny when you really think, we've made a better one, and that whole the whole ending, the Graduate ending, is, to me, is breathtaking. But anyway,
you're a politer person than me. See, I'm on the fan side of the fence, and I just think people were mad. We still bang the drum for that film quite a lot. One thing I did want to ask you, because one of the things that's really important to me with the Film Stories project is about making film reachable to people. I mean, just things like Olivia's from Oldham, and here she is headlining this film that's going out into multiplexes around the country. And I had a chat with Matthew Vaughan about a year or so ago, and he was quite pessimistic about the British film industry and making films in Britain, arguing that it's a system that's just held up by subsidy. And I'm kind of wondering what your view, as someone who's got this project through that system and got a studio to back it ultimately, I wonder what your view is on that, and if you think that film is reachable enough for people in the UK.
I think that the world that I have spent most of my career in has been commercial independent cinema.
Yes.
I've made a lot of what Steve Martin would call big dome comedies.
Yeah.
For the UK market, and aimed very much at people who rarely see the English version of that.
Yeah.
And when you get it right, they relish it, and it's fantastic. It's harder and harder to make those films financially. So, for example, St. Trinian's was supported by the UK Film Council.
Yeah.
The BFI, I don't think, would ever support a film like that. So I know what Matthew means, in the sense that the system in the UK and this is not anything against these organisations, because they do what they do and they do it well. But the BFI, BBC, and the Film 4 are very much focused on a certain kind of art house cinema, which by the nature of it is going to be less appealing to a broad audience.
Yeah.
I think the challenge, which is I think the one that Matthew is speaking to, is how do you make British films that appeal to that broad audience without the support of those people? And if you're making a film that's aimed very much at the UK, it's therefore harder to sell them internationally. So it's like, how do you put those films together is very challenging. And I think that it will be interesting to see how that develops. And I think, we want to attract a much broader kind of person into the movie business and into the movie theatres. And I think that, to me, it's interesting that a movie like Blue Story, which I thought was fantastic, and I think did fantastically, it was completely ignored by the sort of the establishment in a way, and so it's tricky. I don't envy the people. They have a certain amount of money that they have to give out, but it's making sense of all that. It's quite complicated.
One more question then before I'm chucked off, is just, where does this leave you now, and where does this leave Preston as well? Are you keen to explore further projects together?
Yes, we had a great time making this film, and he's writing another movie for me, which is a sort of Hitchcockian thriller.
Oh, lovely!
Which we hope to shoot next year, and I really love this experience. I very much enjoy producing movies, and I'm very happy to continue to do that. But it's been a thrill to really be completely absorbed in this movie, and now as it goes out, you feel, that vulnerability of people waiting to see how people respond to it, because there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
Well, all I can say is huge congratulations on the film and on getting this film made. I think they're twin achievements, really, and we wish you the very best of luck for the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. And that was my chat with Barnaby Thompson, the director of Pixie, which is in UK cinemas as this podcast is being released. It comes with a 15 certificate and is, I don't think I fully explained this at the start, it's a mix of comedy and crime thriller and a whole lot of fun as well. Which brings me to the end of this special episode of Film Stories. You can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew, more from the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories Pod. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline. We're on YouTube with some video exclusive film stories at youtube.com/filmstories. And then there's our website, filmstories.co.uk, updated every weekday with loads of movie news, loads of movie features. You can also find out about our print magazines there and buy copies of them if you like. That'd be nice. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to leave you in peace, and I will be back shortly with your regular weekly episode of Film Stories. Until then, thank you as always for listening, and you all take care. Bye bye.